Welcome to the Get Fit Guys, quick and dirty tips to get moving and shape up. My name is Brock Armstrong, and I'm the Get Fit Guy. I'm going to be honest with you. I was first introduced to the idea of using a continuous glucose monitor to improve your health and longevity a number of years ago, and didn't give it much time or thought, really. My rationale was that, well, I'm not diabetic, so why would I want to bother tracking my blood sugar? Well, I asked my guest on today's podcast episode exactly that. This is what he said.
I think for a person that is a non-diabetic, Veri becomes a really powerful system to build accountability. And that accountability is food accountability. So with Veri, you get this stream of feedback. It's kind of like a feedback system, so to say. So you give an input and it gives you an output, just like sleeping and monitoring that with an Oura Ring, or getting more active and moving with an Apple Watch. Essentially, for a non-diabetic to measure their blood sugar, most of the things come through tracking how well is their metabolic health, what is the state of their metabolic health right now, and how with the food that they eat, they're contributing to that, and the lifestyle habits that they lead.
So Veri is a company that's located in Finland, and the word Veri itself means blood in the Finnish language. So that should give you a big clue right there that Veri is a system to monitor your blood glucose levels to be exact. Now, when I received my Veri package in the mail, inside of it was a small round disc with a tiny hair-like spike coming out from one side. Along with that, there was a plastic applicator and, well, not much else. After I got my partner to help me apply the disc with the hair spike coming out of it into the skin on the back of my arm, on my tricep to be exact, I covered it with a fancy sticker to keep it safe, downloaded the Veri app to my smartphone, and away I went. Over the next 14 days, I tracked my food intake by simply snapping a picture of everything I ate, tracked my sleep using the Apple Health app on my phone and my watch, and periodically I held my iPhone up to that disc on the back of my arm, and you can see a photo of me doing that if you go to quickanddirtytips.com/getfitguy, and that was so Veri could read what has been happening with my blood sugar since I last held my phone up to it. A few hours after each meal or snack, Veri would assign a score to my meal photo, which would inform me whether or not that meal was appropriate for the amount of exercise and sleep I had gotten. The app also gave me a chart and a score for how well I regulated my blood sugar that day, and then made some suggestions for how I could basically keep my blood sugar more consistent and stable. Now, during the first week that I used it, my friends were asking me what I'd learned so far, and I would generally just reply by saying that my pancreas is working correctly. A healthy pancreas secretes the hormones insulin and glucagon, both of which regulate blood sugar. But after that first week was over, the data started to get more meaningful, and the app started to give me more and more useful information. Meaningful and useful enough that I decided to have the co-founder of Veri as a guest on this podcast to chat about, how it works, and to answer some of the questions that came up during my 14-day blood glucose adventure. Now, Anthony Aniabonum is the founder and CEO of Veri, and Veri is a metabolic health company looking to make glucose the next heart rate, which we will touch on in the interview. Prior to building Veri, Anthony worked at Meru Health, a mental health tech company based in the Bay Area. And in his free time, Anthony runs marathons and races Ironman triathlons. So let's get into the interview.
So what was it in particular about blood glucose that drew you to monitoring that instead of all the other crazy quantification things that are popular right now?
I've been super into everything related to health and fitness for the longest time. I've played soccer since I was a kid, and got into CrossFit and these kind of topics at a pretty young age. And I actually was working when I was 17. I was working on building a nutrition/fitness program marketplace So, I've kind of like been interested in the space of human getting into this like better state of health through nutrition and fitness for a pretty long time already.
That sounds like it. That's an interesting path you took. In terms of our audience here with the Get Fit Guy podcast, we really do like to focus on fitness and exercise and workouts and things like that. And the reason that I wanted to bring you on and talk about blood sugar is because it really does serve a very specific purpose when we want to work out or exercise. So can you just sort of summarize how blood sugar actually acts and works and how we can use it to improve our workouts?
Out of all the energy sources that humans could build energy out of, fats, proteins, and carbohydrates and proteins are translated into glucose. And currently, like most of the modern humans run on glucose. So pick any person on the street, most likely they're mainly running on glucose. It necessarily wasn't like that always, but today that's a fact. So understanding this fuel source when thinking about in the context of fitness and exercise in general is extremely crucial so that we can prepare and get the most out of our workouts.
With what you just said in mind, how is monitoring your blood glucose, especially continually monitoring your blood glucose, how can that actually help us improve our fitness?
Monitoring blood sugar can improve our fitness in a couple of ways. One is outside of the gym or outside of the general workout through nutrition. So basically, we as a company and as with Veri, we advocate for stable blood sugar so that you would have as stable blood sugar as possible constantly. There are some borderlines here, some edge cases that are especially things like when working out, which come into play, which I'm happy to explain a bit more in a second. But we advocate for keeping your blood sugar as stable as possible and minimizing your nutritional intake from non-necessary glucose spikes. But when thinking about workouts, if we would want to, for example, get ready for an intensive workout, as we've now done, we can take an extra source of carbohydrates and ingest that and get that extra energy. But to see that actually makes a big change, which I have personally myself experienced. Like seeing is believing. And even you ate that banana before your workout, you know that that's going to increase the amount of energy that you have. But just seeing that, it just reinforces it and takes it to a whole different level.
So one thing that I actually noticed that I thought was really interesting, I'm an intermittent faster, not necessarily because I'm monitoring or measuring or anything like that. I just tend to not like to eat my breakfast until well after my morning workout. So I usually am 14 to 16 hours between my dinner the night before and my breakfast the next day. And I did notice that I would get up in the morning and have a black cup of coffee just because that's the way I drink my coffee. And then I do my workout. And especially if I was doing a weightlifting, like a heavy lifting session or a higher intensity anaerobic kind of workout, that I could see using Veri and looking at my blood sugar levels that during that workout, I actually had a blood sugar spike without any food.
Yeah, really fascinating.
Can you explain what's going on there?
Yeah, basically it isn't any more dependent on the food. It's more dependent on the intensity of the workout and what resources your body is using to utilize for that fuel. There's like a lot of pathways and a lot of things that might go down, but basically like even on a fasted state, you might enter gluconeogenesis and start burning extra fuel there. But mainly thing there is that you have like an deficiency of oxygen when then like you're basically burning glucose as a fuel source there.
Gotcha. So the body is either converting proteins into carbohydrates, because it needs them, or it's pulling them out of like liver storage or muscle storage, again, because there's that lack of oxygen and it needs that glucose to burn.
Yeah.
So you don't even need to eat those sugary things to get that same sort of benefit. I've always heard that, but it was really interesting to actually witness it by using the Veri app and the arm monitor.
Yeah, it's extremely fascinating data to see, and kind of like getting to see that, because like right now thinking about going for a fat burning workout, or then like looking to get, for example, like a better heat workout, like distinguishing those zones where your heart rate needs to be in order to kind of like work on endurance, for example, compared to like burning fat. It's like really challenging, and glucose brings like an extra layer there where we can start seeing breakout points in a new light.
I understand that could actually lead us to, as fitness enthusiasts or people who want to do some racing, like you said, you were doing triathlon and marathon, and so do I. If we're using Veri in those specific times, how can that actually help us make sure that we're fueling correctly for our workouts to make sure that we're getting the most out of our workouts possible?
When thinking about different intensity and length of different workouts, there's a very interesting thing where glucose itself can explain a lot more than the current methods outside there in the market right now. So when thinking about this pathways that you're using, was that working out on an anaerobic level or working out at an aerobic level? The difference is here being that on an anaerobic level, you're working out on a more intensive zone in terms of heart rate. So your heart rate is higher than on an aerobic level. And you're basically, as a fuel source, you are in the environment where you lack oxygen. You are burning glucose faster, which is creating a glucose spike. And that being like visualized in tools like Veri as a glucose spike. So a very interesting thing happens here. So during a heat workout, you would see that you have a glucose spike, and that will reaffirm you that you're doing an aerobic exercise session. When then on an aerobic exercise that is like lengthier and less intensive, you're actually seeing your glucose graph and glucose levels drop a bit, which is a reinforcement that, okay, like now I'm working out on a level that I'm actually looking and optimizing for fat burn. So what we've seen and what we constantly see on the gyms are these labels of which heart zones you are working out on and what you're burning for fuel, or what kind of resistance you're creating. So glucose gives this extra pattern of information there to really help you understand that have you actually reached the tipping point of working out on an anaerobic or an aerobic level.
Yeah, and I actually, through my own experience, I think I found more information outside of my workouts, like seeing how my body was actually reacting to, say, eating a big bowl of oatmeal versus having a egg and vegetables for breakfast. Seeing the difference in my blood sugar rise within the few hours after that informed me how I could use those to my advantage, or to my disadvantage, I guess, in some ways, during my workouts. So if I knew I was going to be demanding that higher glucose, the oatmeal was definitely the better choice. But if I was doing a longer endurance, then I could go for the eggs. And I know that seems really obvious to anybody who knows anything about nutrition, but there was some very specific things I learned about myself, like that I don't react as highly to apples as I say I do to bananas. Like I saw a bigger spike in my blood sugar from one fruit than another, which was a little surprising to me.
Yeah. Definitely. I think there are a lot of like those kind of use cases in our clients as well, and kind of like observations. So a lot of people see very, very controversial / something that they are very surprised things, that something that they've done their whole lives and haven't really realized that. Like oatmeal is like this good example as well, like bananas and so on, that are considered like really good pre-workout, are like spiking some people like really bad and so on, and not necessarily optimizing for avoiding insulin resistance and so on.
Yeah, and you can look at it in that sort of overall health context. But then if you shift the lens, as I did, to like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. I got a really high spike. That I could use that to my advantage before a really good workout or before a race or something like that.
That's a really good point, and that's something as well that is really interesting to optimize for.
So, okay, to sort of finish up, I love to give the listeners some tips that they can really look at and start working on right away. So even if somebody wasn't going to buy a continuous glucose monitor like Veri, what are your top 3 tips to maintain your blood sugar in the optimal zone, whether they're doing it for fitness or just for overall health?
My 3 main tips for maintaining optimal blood sugar is, well, cutting down on simple processed carbohydrates. Very rarely do these sources really contribute to anything. And as well, like dropping processed foods. So dropping like processed foods from your diet will pay dividends. Of course, then as well, something that I've learned myself in during my long distance exercises and so on is to try to find alternative energy sources than gels and other like very simple sugars. So what I've like engineered myself for during workouts, I do energy balls basically with peanut butter and a lot of like good nutrients to just have a much more stable blood sugar throughout the race, but still like extra energy during the workouts. One final tip that I would give is working out fasted. This is something that I've like started doing a lot after being introduced to this space a couple of years ago now. You basically simply, when you're working out fasted, you are training your metabolism to utilize fat for fuel, which is something that, as said in the beginning, most modern humans are not accustomed to. Most modern humans are running on glucose, which is a different pathway than oxidizing fat for fuel. So working out fasted is actually working out your metabolism as well to use that other pathway that is very distinct to the glucose metabolizing pathway.
I love the tip about finding different fuel sources, especially for during those long races. I did an Ironman triathlon a few years ago, and I think I had 16 of those terrible gooey gel pack things during that race. Yep. And I just felt awful. It just ruined my gut for a couple of days.
Yep, exactly. The next days are horrible.
So, all right. So if somebody wanted to get in touch with you to learn more, or if they want to get themselves a Veri to try out, where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, we are currently on a limited release. Veristable.com is our domain. We're distributing the product under from the wait list and letting people through bit by bit. But hot tip is if you use a secret code at the end, which is skip the line, all caps, you'll get past the wait list and get yourself a product.
Oh, good tip.
Yep.
All right. And I'll put links and everything in the show notes so you don't have to try to remember that. And I know you're active on social media. Is that a good place to reach out if people have questions?
Yeah, definitely. Twitter is a good place to find me.
Great. Well, thank you, Anthony. This is very, very interesting stuff.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Brock. Really appreciate bringing me on board, and hopefully you enjoyed using Veri.
I did.
All right, I'd like to thank Anthony one more time for coming on the Get Fit Guy podcast to tell us all about our blood sugar. And remember, you can go to veristable, veristable.com and use that code skip the line if you want to give Veri a try. Now, my name is Brock Armstrong. I'm the Get Fit Guy, asking you, what are you waiting for? Get that Veri stable.